She took in a homeless stranger, not knowing he was a billionaire who'd been searching for her all along. He stood in the rain, bruised and silent, clutching a torn photograph of a woman he could never forget. She had no idea that the stranger she was about to help was the billionaire who once lost everything to find her. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Untold. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let's dive into the untold story that changed everything. The night was colder than usual in Seattle. Emma Carter hurried down the empty street, her worn-out umbrella barely holding against the wind. She had just finished her second job at the diner, and her shoes were soaked through. All she wanted was to reach home, a small studio she could barely afford. But fate had other plans. Near the corner of 3rd Avenue, she saw a man sitting under a broken streetlight. His hair was messy, his coat torn, and his eyes deep and haunting met hers for just a second. He looked too clean to be truly homeless, too lost to belong anywhere. She hesitated, clutching her purse tighter, then took a deep breath. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked gently. The man said nothing at first. His voice came out rough, like it had been buried for years. I just need a place to rest for tonight." Every instinct told her to walk away, but there was something about his eyes, something familiar. Against all logic, Emma reached out her hand. "You can come to my place, just for tonight." His name, he said, was Daniel Hayes. He looked exhausted, as if he had not eaten in days. When they reached her apartment, she gave him a blanket, a bowl of instant noodles, and the old couch she used when her bed felt too lonely. He thanked her softly, the kind of thank you that carried pain rather than relief. While Emma tedied the small space, Daniel's gaze wandered across her photographs, pictures of her late father, a charity award from high school, and one of her in a hospital uniform. "You are a nurse?" he asked. "Not anymore," she said, forcing a smile. "I could not afford the tuition after Dad passed. The diner pays the bills. Most of them." Daniel lowered his eyes. "You should not have helped me," he murmured. "You do not even know who I am." Emma looked at him, half amused, half concerned. "You are just a man who needed a roof for one night. That is enough for me." But that night, as she turned off the lights, Daniel could not sleep. He stared at the cracked ceiling, his thoughts circling back to the photograph hidden inside his coat pocket, the same face, the same eyes. He had searched for years, across cities and countries, for the girl who once saved him when no one else would. Now she was here, standing only a few feet away, unaware of the truth buried in his name. He was not just Daniel Hayes. He was Daniel Harrington, the missing heir to the Harrington Group, one of the largest private conglomerates in America. And tonight, fate had brought him face to face with the only woman who ever saw him as more than his fortune. Emma, tired and half asleep, whispered softly before drifting off, "I hope tomorrow is better." Daniel looked at her from across the room, a storm of emotions crossing his face. Tomorrow, he thought, might change everything. Let us return to our main character, unaware that the man sleeping on her couch was about to rewrite her entire destiny. The next morning, light filtered through the thin curtains, touching the worn couch where Daniel lay awake. He had not closed his eyes all night. He watched Emma move quietly through her morning routine, making instant coffee in a chipped mug, tying her hair back before heading to her shift at the diner. Every small gesture reminded him of the girl she once was, the one who had unknowingly saved him years ago. When Emma noticed him, sitting up, she smiled faintly. "You can stay for breakfast," she said, handing him a piece of toast. "After that, I can help you find a shelter nearby." Daniel hesitated. "You really do not have to help me more than you already have." She shrugged, her voice soft but firm. "I know what it feels like to have no one. Sometimes a little kindness can change everything." Her words hit him deeper than she could imagine. Daniel took a slow breath. He knew he could not reveal his identity yet, not until he understood her heart. But time was running out. His assistant, Marcus, had already sent him countless messages, asking when he would return to the corporate world. Daniel deleted them all. Later that day, Emma rushed home after a long double shift. The sky had turned crimson with the setting sun, and she was exhausted. To her surprise, Daniel was still there, quietly fixing her broken kitchen cabinet. "I hope you do not mind," he said. It looked like it was about to fall. She looked at him, a little startled but grateful. You fixed that? No one ever offered to help me here before. He smiled for the first time. Maybe you just never had the right person around. As the days passed, Daniel stayed longer than planned. He offered to pay rent, but Emma refused. Instead, he started helping with chores, repairing things around the apartment, and even walking her home from work. The neighbors began to notice, whispering about the mysterious man who always waited outside the diner. One rainy evening, Emma came home with a letter in her hand. She looked pale. It is an eviction notice, she said quietly. The landlord sold the building. I have 30 days to leave. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to fix it immediately. One call could buy the whole complex, but he could not. Doing so would reveal everything. Instead, he looked at her with a calm she did not understand. What will you do now? I will figure it out, she whispered, forcing a brave smile. I always do. He studied her face, her trembling hands, the way she tried to hold herself together. Emma, he said slowly, what if I told you I have an offer that could help both of us? She blinked, confused. What kind of offer? He took a breath. A temporary arrangement. You pretend to be my wife for a few months. In return, I will make sure you never have to worry about rent or bills again. Emma froze. That sounds insane. Why would you need that? Daniel's gaze darkened. My family's company is tied to an inheritance clause. The board wants me to appear settled before I regain control. I need someone real, someone I can trust. You are the only one who has shown me kindness without wanting anything in return. Her heartbeat quickened. You barely know me. I know enough, he said quietly. I know you care. Silence filled the small apartment. Rain tapped against the round window as Emma tried to process his words. The idea was ridiculous, yet the desperation in his eyes made it sound almost human. Finally, she spoke. You said temporary? 6 months, Daniel replied. After that, you walk away with full freedom and enough money to start your life again. She hesitated, staring at the eviction notice on the table. Her pride fought against her need, her heart against her reason. After a long pause, she whispered, Fine, but there are rules. No lies, no touch, and no real promises. Daniel nodded slowly. Agreed, but remember, sometimes the heart does not follow contracts. That night, while signing her name on the paper, Emma felt her chest tighten. She did not know that this deal, born from necessity, would soon become the most dangerous promise of her life. 2 weeks later, Emma Carter found herself standing in front of a marble mansion that looked like something from another world. Her second-hand suitcase seemed painfully out of place among the tall glass windows and iron gates. Daniel walked beside her in silence, his usual calm expression unreadable. When the driver opened the door, Emma hesitated before stepping inside. The air smelled of polished wood and wealth, something she had never experienced before. The contract she had signed felt heavier now than the pen she had used to sign it. Welcome home, Mrs. Harrington, said the butler, an older man with sharp eyes. Emma almost laughed at the title. She wanted to correct him, to explain that this was only an arrangement, but Daniel gave her a slight nod as if reminding her to stay in character. She managed a small smile and whispered, Thank you. Inside, everything gleamed, the chandelier, the grand piano, even the staircase seemed to sparkle. Emma felt lost. Daniel, this is too much, she murmured. I do not belong here. He looked at her calmly. You belong wherever you choose to stand. Their new life began that evening with a family dinner arranged by Daniel's aunt, Margaret Harrington, the matriarch who controlled most of the family's fortune. Her sharp voice filled the dining room. So, Daniel, this is your wife? Rather sudden, is it not? Emma could feel Margaret's cold stare slicing through her every movement. She forced a polite smile. Yes, ma'am. It was unexpected, but sometimes life surprises us. Margaret leaned back. Indeed. And what do you do, dear? I used to work at a diner, Emma answered honestly. The table went silent. Daniel's cousin Brandon smirked. A diner? How charming. Emma's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Daniel's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. Her kindness saved me when I had nothing. That is more than most people in this room can say. The room froze. Margaret's expression softened slightly, but her tone remained cold. "We will see if your kindness can survive our world, Mrs. Harrington." That night, when the guests were gone, Emma retreated to the guest room Daniel had arranged for her. She closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. "This was a mistake," she whispered. Daniel knocked gently. "Are you all right?" She opened the door a crack. "I am fine. I am not used to being judged like that." "You handled yourself with grace," he said quietly. "They underestimate you. Let them." His words were kind, but his eyes were distant. He turned to leave, and Emma felt a strange ache in her chest. She reminded herself this was only a contract, nothing real. Over the next weeks, the distance between them grew. They appeared together at charity events, fundraisers, and company dinners. Cameras flashed. Headlines praised the mysterious wife of Daniel Harrington. But behind closed doors, their conversations were short and careful. In public, he held her hand for the cameras. In private, he kept his emotions locked behind polite silence. Emma could not understand him. Some nights she caught him staring at the same torn photograph, his face unreadable. One evening, she found him in his study, staring out the window. "You never sleep," she said softly. "Sleep is for those who are at peace," he replied. She hesitated. "Are you?" He turned to her, his expression heavy with unspoken words. "Not yet." Emma wanted to ask more, but the air between them had grown fragile. She simply nodded and left. Later that night, as she lay awake in her room, she heard the faint sound of piano keys from downstairs. The melody was slow and haunting, filled with loneliness. For a moment, she closed her eyes and listened. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the first spark of something dangerous, something that had nothing to do with the contract. It was not pity anymore. It was the beginning of a feeling she could not control. She whispered into the dark, "Do not fall for him. It is only 6 months." But her heart, restless and defiant, was already betraying the deal. Winter came early that year, coating Seattle in a pale layer of snow. The Harrington mansion glowed from the outside, a fortress of glass and light. Yet inside, silence stretched between Daniel and Emma like an invisible wall. Their contract life had turned into a pattern of polite routines, shared dinners without words, distant glances across rooms, and smiles that looked convincing only to strangers. One morning, Emma woke to find the kitchen empty but warm. A handwritten note lay on the counter beside a steaming cup of coffee. "For you," it read. "I noticed you like it with a little sugar." She blinked in surprise. Daniel had never been awake this early before. Later that day, she saw him in the garden, sleeves rolled up, trying to fix the frozen fountain that had stopped running. His breath fogged in the cold air, and his hands were covered in frost. Without thinking, she stepped outside and called out, "You will freeze out there." He looked up with a faint smile. "You told me you liked the sound of the water. I thought I could bring it back to life." Her voice softened. "You do not have to do that for me." "I am not doing it for you," he said, then paused. "Maybe I am." The words hung between them like a fragile thread, thin yet powerful. For the first time, she saw the man behind the billionaire image, the tired eyes, the loneliness that even wealth could not hide. That evening, snow kept falling. The staff had gone home early because of the storm, leaving the mansion unusually quiet. Emma lit the fireplace in the sitting room and curled up with a blanket. Daniel entered silently, carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. "I did not know you drink cocoa," she said, smiling slightly. "I do not," he replied, handing her one. "But you look like you needed it." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound, the crackling of fire. Finally, Emma spoke. "When this is over, what will you do?" Daniel stared into the flames. "I will go back to the board, to business, to being the man they expect me to be." "And will that make you happy?" He turned to her slowly. "Happiness is not something I think about much." She studied him, realizing that for all his power, Daniel Harrington seemed like the loneliest man she had ever met. Something inside her shifted. The boundaries of their contract blurred slightly that night, not in words, but in the quiet space between them. Days passed, and the tension softened. Daniel began joining her for breakfast. He listened when she talked about her late father, about how he used to fix everything with his bare hands. because they could never afford a repairman. Daniel started helping her cook, though he burned toast more often than not. Emma laughed for the first time in weeks, and he looked at her as if that sound alone could heal something inside him. One afternoon, Emma slipped on the icy steps outside the mansion. Before she hit the ground, Daniel caught her, his arms wrapped around her instinctively, holding her steady. Their faces were inches apart. For a moment, the world went still. She could feel his heartbeat under his coat, fast and uneven. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "I am fine," she whispered, though her cheeks burned. He did not move, neither did she. Finally, Daniel stepped back, clearing his throat. "Be careful. The ice is deceptive." As he walked away, Emma pressed her hand to her chest. "So is this," she murmured. That night, as she lay in bed, she could not stop thinking about the look in his eyes. There was no arrogance, no distance, only warmth and fear, as if he was just as lost as she was. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the line between fake and real love began to fade. Emma whispered to herself, "It is only a contract," but deep down, she knew her heart no longer cared about the rules. Daniel, alone in his study, stared at the signed papers that had once seemed like protection. He closed his eyes and whispered, "She was supposed to be pretend." Yet as the firelight flickered across the empty room, he realized that somewhere between lies and truth, Emma had become the only thing in his world that felt real. Spring arrived quietly, melting the last traces of snow around the Harrington estate. Emma had grown used to the rhythm of her new life, the polite dinners, the charity events, and the subtle warmth that had begun to bloom between her and Daniel. Though the contract still defined their relationship, something deeper had begun to take root. One afternoon, Emma accompanied Daniel to a corporate fundraiser downtown. The ballroom sparkled with chandeliers and gold-rimmed glasses. Cameras flashed the moment they entered, and reporters whispered about the billionaire's mysterious wife. Emma wore a simple navy gown that Daniel had insisted she choose. "You look perfect," he had said softly before the car arrived. For a while, everything felt almost real. They laughed together, shared quiet glances across the room, and when he touched her hand to guide her through the crowd, the world seemed to fade. But peace, as always, never lasted long in Daniel Harrington's world. During the event, Emma noticed a tall woman approach Daniel with familiarity. Her voice was sharp, laced with old bitterness. "So, this is your wife?" she asked. Daniel's shoulders stiffened. "Victoria," he said cautiously, "this is not the time." "Oh, I think it is," Victoria replied, her eyes flicking toward Emma. "You should know, Mrs. Harrington, that your husband's business deals are built on lies. He may look like a saint now, but he is the same man who vanished 2 years ago and left an empire in chaos." Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What is she talking about, Daniel? But before he could answer, security arrived to escort the woman away. The rest of the evening passed in silence. Daniel avoided her gaze, his jaw tight, his charm replaced by a quiet storm. When they returned home, Emma finally broke the silence. "Who was she? And why did she call you a liar?" Daniel loosened his tie, exhaustion etched into his face. "Victoria used to be part of the company. She was engaged to my brother before he stopped. It is complicated." Emma crossed her arms. "Then, uncomplicate it." He looked at her, the weight of his secrets catching up to him. "There are things I cannot tell you. Not yet." Her eyes filled with hurt. "You asked me to trust you. You made me sign a contract to live beside you every single day, and yet you hide who you are." "It was supposed to protect you," he said quietly. "I did not want you dragged into my family's war." Her voice trembled. "Then what am I to you, Daniel? A name on paper? A shield?" He took a step closer, but she stepped back. "You were never supposed to matter this much," he whispered. The words struck her harder than any confession could. "Then congratulations," she said bitterly. "You succeeded in keeping it fake." Emma turned and left the room. Behind her, Daniel slammed his fist against the wall, hating himself for every truth he had buried. Later that night, Emma could not sleep. She wandered into his study, searching for answers. On the desk, half hidden under a folder, she found the torn photograph, the same one she had seen him staring at for months. Her breath caught as she turned it over. It was her, years younger, standing in front of the small hospital where she once volunteered. On the back was written, "Find her again." Her hand shook. He had known her long before that night in the rain. The next morning she confronted him. "You lied to me," she said, holding up the photograph. Daniel froze. "Emma, how long have you known who I was?" He closed his eyes. "Since the first night. You were the nurse who saved my life after the accident. I remembered your voice before your face." Her voice broke. "All this time, and you never told me. I wanted to, but I needed to know if you would care for the man, not the name." Emma's tears fell silently. "You did not give me a choice. You made me love a lie." Daniel reached for her, but she stepped back. "Do not," she whispered. "The contract ends today." And before he could say another word, she walked out into the rain, the same rain that had once brought them together, now tearing them apart. The rain did not stop for 3 days. It poured over Seattle like a reflection of Emma's heart, cold, endless, and full of questions that had no answers. She packed her few belongings into a small suitcase and left the Harrington mansion without looking back. The driver offered to take her to a hotel, but she refused. She wanted no trace of that world anymore. Emma found a small apartment near the harbor, barely large enough for a single bed and a flickering lamp. She spent her days working double shifts at a clinic, and her nights staring at the window, replaying every moment with Daniel Harrington, the laughter, the warmth, and the lie that had broken her trust. Across the city, Daniel's world had also fallen apart. The media caught wind of his separation, and rumors swirled through every financial paper. "The billionaire's contract wife leaves him," one headline read. "Was it all fake?" another whispered. For the first time in years, Daniel ignored his company, ignored the board, and stayed locked in his office, staring at the rain. Marcus, his loyal assistant, entered quietly one evening. "Sir, you cannot keep doing this. The merger vote is next week. If you are not there, you could lose everything." Daniel's eyes were hollow. "Everything?" he said softly. "I already did." He pulled out the same torn photograph Emma had found, now crumpled from being held too tightly. "She was the only part of my life that was real, Marcus, and I destroyed it." Marcus sighed. "Then fix it. You always fix everything else." Daniel shook his head. "This is not business. This is something I cannot buy, or negotiate, or plan." Meanwhile, Emma tried to bury herself in work, pretending that her heart had not become a battlefield. One evening, as she walked home from the clinic, she saw a homeless man sitting by the same corner where she had once met Daniel. He looked up at her and smiled weakly. "You helped me once," he said. "That kindness saved my life." Emma froze. The man's words echoed Daniel's voice from months ago. Her eyes filled with tears. Maybe kindness was both her strength and her curse. It always brought her close to people who could hurt her most. Back at the mansion, Daniel finally decided to face his board. The meeting was ruthless. Margaret Harrington, his aunt, looked at him with sharp disapproval. "You let your emotions cost this family its reputation," she said. "We built this empire on discipline, not sentiment." Daniel met her gaze with quiet resolve. "Then maybe it is time this empire learns how to be human again." He signed over a portion of his shares, shocking the room. "From now on, the company will run without my name. I have other things to rebuild." Margaret's eyes widened. "And what could possibly be more important than this family?" Daniel stood, his voice steady. "The woman who taught me what it means to be one." As he left the building, the sky began to clear. For the first time in months, sunlight broke through the clouds. He knew where he had to go. That same evening, Emma returned home to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a familiar handwriting. "I will not ask for forgiveness. I only ask for one chance to make things right. Meet me at the place where it all began." Her hands trembled. She knew exactly where that was. The rain-soaked street corner where a stranger once sat with a torn photograph. Emma clutched the letter, torn between fear and hope. The contract was long over, but something deeper still tied her to him. She looked out the window, watching the last drops of rain fade into the light. "Maybe some stories are not meant to end," she whispered. "The deepest secrets are about to change everything." Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. Emma stood at the corner of 3rd Avenue, the same place where their story had begun. The city lights reflected on wet pavement, turning every puddle into a mirror of the past. She clutched Daniel's letter in her hand, unsure whether she should wait or walk away forever. Minutes turned into an hour. Just when she began to lose hope, the familiar sound of an engine echoed down the street. "A daughter." Black car stopped, and Daniel stepped out. He looked exhausted but determined, the weight of regret clear in his eyes. "I did not know if you would come," he said softly. "I almost did not," Emma replied, her voice calm but trembling. "Why now, Daniel? After everything?" "Because I finally learned that power means nothing without peace," he said. "And peace does not exist without you." She stared at him, the memories of betrayal still raw. "You had every chance to tell me the truth. You chose to let me live a lie." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you would walk away. I wanted to see how it felt to be loved for the man, not the money. But in trying to protect that, I destroyed it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You cannot undo what you did." "I cannot," he admitted. "But I can start again, this time with no lies, no contracts, no walls." Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed behind them. A truck skidded on the wet road, its headlights blinding. Without hesitation, Daniel grabbed her and pulled her out of the way. The truck smashed into a light post, sending sparks into the air. They fell onto the pavement, shaken but safe. Emma looked up at him, panic flooding her voice. "Daniel, are you hurt?" He winced, blood trickling from a cut on his arm. "Nothing serious," he said with a weak smile. "Looks like fate still refuses to take me before I make things right." In that moment, something broke inside her, anger, a realization that, despite everything, she still cared. She pressed her hand against his wound. "You could have been killed," she whispered. He looked at her, voice low. "You are the only thing worth dying for." For a long second, they said nothing. The rain returned, gentle this time, washing away the dust and fear. Daniel stood, offering his hand. "Come home, Emma. Not to the mansion, not to my name, just to me." She looked at his hand, then at his eyes, still unsure. But deep inside, a fragile piece of her heart began to heal. Without a word, she placed her hand in his. Together, they walked through the quiet street where everything had once begun, unaware that the real storm, the confession that would change both their lives, was still waiting to come. Bandanoi. The night air carried the scent of rain and asphalt, as Daniel and Emma walked in silence. Every step felt heavy, charged with the weight of everything they had left unsaid. When they reached the small park near the harbor, Daniel stopped under a street lamp. Its soft light reflected against the water, painting them both in silver. "I did not bring you here to beg," Daniel said quietly. "I brought you here because this is the first place I ever saw you smile. Back then, I was lost. I did not know who I was, or what mattered. You reminded me that being seen without judgment is worth more than every fortune ever earned." Emma looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Then why did you lie? You had my trust. You had my heart." Daniel took a deep breath. "Because I was a coward. I thought that if you saw my name, you would only see the headlines, the man who built empires but could not love. I did not realize that by hiding, I made myself the man you could never truly know." Emma's voice cracked. "You hurt me more than anyone ever has." "I know," he said, "and I will spend every day trying to be the man who deserves the way you once looked at me." For a moment, only the sound of the waves filled the silence. Then Daniel pulled something from his pocket, a folded paper, creased and worn. "This was the last page of our contract. I kept it after you left." Emma frowned. "Why?" He smiled sadly. "Because it reminded me that even if everything began as a deal, you still gave me something real." He held out the paper, then slowly tore it in half. "No more conditions. No more pretending." Tears streamed down her face. "Daniel, this is not about contracts anymore. This is about what you want, and what I cannot risk." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "What I want is you. Not the woman who saved me. Not the nurse. Not the stranger who took me in. Just you." She looked up at him, seeing the same man who had once been a broken soul in the rain. But now he stood before her, stripped of everything, no wealth, no power, no mask, only truth. Daniel's hand brushed her cheek gently. "I love you, Emma. I have loved you since the night you gave a stranger a place to belong. For the first time, Emma did not look away. Her tears mixed with the rain as she whispered, "Then stop running from the man you are. Because I never fell in love with your name. I fell for the way you made me believe again." He leaned in, their foreheads touching as the rain began to fall harder. It was not a kiss of desire, but one of redemption, two broken hearts finally meeting where truth lived. In that moment, there were no contracts, no lies, and no distance left between them. Only love, fragile yet real, reborn in the storm that had once torn them apart. Morning broke over the harbor, soft and golden, casting a gentle glow across the still water. For the first time in months, Emma felt peace instead of ache. The night before had washed away everything that had kept them apart, the anger, the secrets, and the pain. All that remained was truth. Daniel stood beside her, his coat draped over her shoulders. The city was waking slowly, unaware that two hearts had just begun again. He turned to her, voice steady but filled with emotion. "I do not expect forgiveness overnight. I only ask for the chance to prove that what we have is real." Emma looked at him, the morning light softening the sharp lines of his face. "You already did," she said. "You came back, not to defend your name, but to fight for your heart. That is enough for me." Daniel exhaled deeply, a quiet relief escaping his chest. "I spent my life signing contracts to protect everything I owned. But the only promise that matters now is the one I make to you. No signatures, no papers, just faith." Emma smiled, tears filling her eyes. "Then make it simple, Daniel. Promise me that when life gets hard again, you will not disappear behind your name." He reached for her hand. "I promise. No more hiding, no more lies. From now on, we walk through every storm together." They stood there, hand in hand, as the sunlight broke through the clouds. The world around them seemed quieter, almost sacred, as if the universe itself was granting them a second chance. Weeks later, the Harrington mansion looked different. The grand hall that once echoed with loneliness now carried laughter and warmth. Emma transformed part of it into a small medical foundation, helping those who had no one else. Daniel supported her, quietly, proud of the woman who had turned pain into purpose. At one event, reporters asked Daniel about his future. He smiled gently and said, "The company runs itself now. My wife taught me something better than profit. She taught me that love is the only legacy worth leaving behind." The crowd applauded, but Daniel's eyes were on Emma. She stood across the room, watching him with the same quiet faith she had shown that first night in the rain. They shared a look that spoke more than any vow could. Later that evening, as they walked through the garden, Emma whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Daniel smiled. "Every day. It began as a lie, but somehow the lie led me to the truth." Emma leaned into him, her voice soft. "Sometimes love begins where the contract ends." He kissed her forehead gently. "And for us, it will never end." The camera would fade on the two of them walking under the same night sky that had once witnessed their pain, now shining brighter than ever. Their story, born from deception, ended not in wealth or power, but in the one thing both of them had always searched for: redemption through love. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.